Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 10 tips on how to create some better sounding chord progressions of your own. This video is going to be geared for the people who already know a little bit about how to play chord progressions, as well as some of the people who might not necessarily know much, but I think either way you can get some benefit from this video. To get the most out of it, you really should have an understanding of how to play the major scale in a couple of different keys already, as well as how to play the chords within those keys. If you don't understand this stuff right now, don't worry about it. We're going to quickly cover this stuff in the beginning of the video, and then we'll get on to the 10 tips. So without further ado, let's go over to the piano and I'll show you how this stuff works. So before we get into the tips, let's do a quick refresh on the major scale. Okay, we've got the pattern whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. All right, so now using this whole and half step pattern, we should be able to figure out any major scale in whatever key. So for example, if we put this into the key of G major, and we do whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, then we're going to be able to find it in any key, and you can do this with all the other ones. Just remember that pattern and you should be good to go. All right, so in the major scale, I'm going to go back to the key of C. We've got 7 notes, okay, and then it repeats, and so we're just going to call these guys the scale degrees. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. So if we build an interval of a third from the root note, so this is our interval of a third, and a fifth off the bottom note of our scale degrees, and we play it all at the same time, we're going to get what's called the major chord. Now I'm sure some of you might already know this kind of stuff, but just kind of bear with me just so we can kind of cover the basic concepts here. Basically, if we take this chord shape and we move it up, we're going to get what we call a minor chord. Now in the major scale, we can keep going up with this sort of shape, and we're going to get a bunch of different types of chords. We're going to get major, we're going to get minor chords, and the last chord right here is what we're going to get is called a diminished chord. This chord's a little different. You can still use it in a lot of places, but most commonly we use the major and minor chords the most. The major chords, as just a quick refresh, are the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord, or the 5th scale degree. Our minor chords are the 2nd, the 6th scale degree, and the 3rd scale degree, okay? And of course that diminished is on the 7th. So with that out of the way, let's get on to the 10 tips for creating better chord progressions. All right, so tip number 1. Learn more chord voicings for your major and minor chords. Okay, so the biggest thing when it comes to actually just sitting down and creating some chord progressions is just to have a lot of stuff available to you. I know for myself, a lot of the times I'm not thinking of a lot technically, types of different chord progressions. A lot of the times I'll just gravitate to a lot of chord shapes that I know. And, if you're like me, a lot of the times if you don't have if you've probably got some go-to shapes, but something you really want to try and do is learn as many different types of voicings as possible. And so what I'm going to do just quickly is just to show you a couple primer chord voicings for major and minor chords. We're going to start out with a major chord voicing. This is going to be a major 9, okay? So that's what it sounds like. Really, really pretty chord. Really pretty chord. The way I'm getting this chord is I'm simply just putting a 5th in the bottom here on the 1st and 5th scale degree of C major. It doesn't matter, you can put this in any key, or in terms of a chord, okay? So I've got the 5ths there, and I've got a 9, a 3rd, and a 7th. So practice this all over the keyboard. Move it all around, try in different positions. The more familiar you are with all these shapes, the better you'll be able to use them whenever, you're just trying to play. So here's another one, okay? This is a major 7 voicing again, and this is kind of a very, very similar concept. I'm putting the 5ths in the bass, okay? And I'm doing an octave here with the E, or the 3rd, and I'm using my middle finger to play the 7th again, and so it sounds like this. In some other keys, chord. So the other two are a minor 7. This is a kind of a stock, I call a stock minor 7 voicing. All I'm doing here is having the root, a flat 7. So this is our 7. What I mean by a flat 7 is I'm just lowering it there like that, okay? And then I've got a flat 3rd. And then I've got the 5th. I've got the flat 7 again from here, and then I'm also adding that 9. This is a great one. That's 9 sounds super nice. Okay, the last one I'm gonna show you is a little variation on it. We're gonna add the 11 in the chord. Really enjoy this voicing. So we've got a C here, the root, 5th, that flat 7 again I was talking about. We've got the 9 in here, the flat 3, and we've actually added the 11th in this one here too, and we're also putting that flat 7. And just to get that kind of jazzy, I guess. But anyways, so that pretty much just sums it up for those chords. You know, again, if you want to learn a little bit more, I'm going to put another video up. You can definitely check that out. Anyways, so that's tip number 1. Learn more chord voicings for your major and minor chords. It's really going to help out when you just go and sit down, okay? All right, so tip number 2, use inversions instead of always playing your chords in root position. So what do I mean by that? A lot of the times I'll see a lot of my students play stuff like this, and they might, you know, do like this. If we're talking maybe this progression, so 1, 3, 6, 4, sure, why not? Okay, and what they're not doing is they're not using any inversions. And we're going to take this example of that chord progression, and I'm just going to show you an example where if I had just changed the inversion, I can get a more interesting sound. So I can get a more interesting sound by doing this kind of thing. So maybe instead of starting like this, I might start like, that's a very simple way of doing it. You can expand this and take it as far as you'd like, but this is just a really, really short idea that I hope will help. A lot of the times, you know, we're always thinking of stuff in root position, and it'd be really nice, you know, trying to take it out of that and trying different inversions as well, because they sound great. Okay, tip number 3, use sus chords to delay a resolution or go in between a chord and then kind of go back into it. This is a really cool tool you can use a lot. I really use the second thing I was saying, where you kind of use it to go in between chords, but you can also use it to delay your resolutions as well. So in the example here, I'm gonna maybe do like really, really simple progression, the 1, 4, 5, 1, okay? So now, one of the ways we can delay a resolution is, for example, we are playing the progression, you see that? That. Coming from here, and that can be really cool. You know, it's a certain sort of thing. There's so many other places you can use it, and I'll just quickly cover the idea of going in between. So say, for example, I'm just chilling on the chord C. So now what I want to do is I want to just kind of go in between the sus and the major chord. See how I can just do this forever. Right? And so that's a great way to go in between stuff. You can use it in so many other places. Those are the most common places I'll kind of use a sus chord. So on to tip number 4, add the 7th or 6th note to your major or minor chords. So when I was first starting, I learned all my chords, you know, like these major chords. minor chords. Maybe if you were ambitious, you tried an augmented or a diminished chord. But I'm sure you probably also checked them out. But one of the things that I thought was super cool when I first started doing them was just these seventh chords. Now again, I think I'll also have a video talking about all these, what we call seventh chords. And they sound great. They're used a lot in jazz. But basically, in one of the things you can do is try to add some of these seventh chords to your chord progressions or whatever. The seventh or sixth chords, these sound great as well. These are good, but these are also really dope. So an example, for example, in this chord progression, I might use that a minor 7. Then I might use a major 7. That's the major 7 right there. If you use these chords, they can just definitely add a little bit more color to some of your chord progressions. Just keep in mind, use it tastefully. All right, so on to tip number 5. Add the opposite chord to what's supposed to be there just for fun. We were kind of talking a little bit earlier about in the major scale, every single scale degree, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, has a given chord for it. So say, for example, the 1 chord is major, 2 chords minor, 3 chords minor, 4 chords major, 5 chord is major, 6 chords minor, and our 7th chord is diminished. And that is the same way across all our keys. And so what I'm trying to tell you is use the opposite chord to what's supposed to be there. So say, for example, maybe on our 3 chord, so 1, 2, 3 in the key of C, instead of a minor chord, I'm going to use a major chord. All right, and in the context of a chord progression, that can sound really interesting because that's not really supposed to be there. So if I'm playing my chord progression, I don't know. See, that kind of adds a little bit of interesting. Kind of adds a little bit of interesting, because that makes sense. So that's another example of doing that. So we've kind of got the major chord, and instead I've just added a minor chord. This is a very common technique in case you haven't noticed, where you kind of do a 4 minor and then to the 1. Really sounds good. Okay, cool. So on to tip numbers. Oh, okay. So I was saying earlier that I'm sort of glazing over a topic. Now, this topic is, if you want to learn a little bit more about it, it's called modal interchange, but it's a really, really cool concept if you're looking to, honestly just create better chord progressions, which is why I hope you're here. So definitely check that out. Modal mixture, you'll learn a lot of cool stuff. It kind of goes into a more technical side, and you can kind of get an idea of, what you're doing rather than just kind of trying stuff out. But I think, part of the fun in music is just experimenting and having fun. So that's tip number 5. Add the opposite chord to what's supposed to be there in the major scale just for fun and see what you can come up with, okay? Tip number 6, go to an inversion of a chord you're on rather than a new chord. This kind of is related to tip number 2, where you're using inversions instead of always playing your chords, in root position. But this kind of takes it a little bit further in the sense that you can still start, a chord in root position, but instead of actually going to a new chord, I might actually play an inversion of that chord. So maybe I might do, let me do something simpler. Okay, so. So like just this kind of first inversion thing. So I'm just taking this bottom note and I'm moving it up, right? So I might go, instead of playing, that E minor chord, I might go. okay? And so that's one example of doing it. Experiment with it on your own. You'll find that it's definitely a really, really cool idea. Instead of always just kind of going from one chord to the next chord. Try an inversion of it. And I didn't really actually put this in my list, and it's just kind of coming up now. But a great thing you can do really is just try moving the bass note. Some of it will sound good, some of it won't. So just speak word. Well, all of that sounded good, so that's cool. But you can do that. And, you know, also change your inversions too, you know, just moving a bass note down. Side fun tip. Okay, cool. On to number 7. Think about voice leading your chords properly. Now, properly basically just means we're not trying to do any crazy jumps. So a jump would basically be something like where this top note is going up maybe, I mean, a third's okay, but you don't really want it to be going, like say for example, I was doing 1 to 6, right? One major to 6 minor. I wouldn't want to do this. You know what I mean? What's my top note? So it'd be going like, I mean, that can kind of sound good, and in some situations, maybe that is what you want. But I think applying this concept over and over again will just in general make you create better and smoother sounding chord progressions, because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what voice leading does. So in the example of, you know, what I just showed you, maybe something better might be like, and better, of course, is subject. There you go, there's hallelujah. Just the first part. So really try to voice lead your chords a little better, you know, when you're playing, and that definitely will smooth out your chords. On to tip number 8. Add notes in between your chords to give it extra rhythmic variety. To start doing it, you could try not always playing your chords with the same fingers. Okay, so now what I mean by that is like a lot of the times, I know for myself when I was learning, you know, classical piano, we're like, okay, yeah, do 1, 3, 5. You know, you've got all your inversions and so on, but try learning them with different fingerings. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4. Try something like, you know, where your chord like 1, 2, 4 instead of that, and then just try like adding one note, like. Right? And you see how that actually just makes a big difference from just like, yeah, makes a big difference. And not that there's anything wrong with this, but it just kind of, right? It just kind of adds a little bit more. And it also allows you to start kind of creating your own melody, with the chords, and that's a lot of fun too as well. Okay, so on to tip number 9. Vary the rhythm of your chords and divide those rhythms between the notes of the chord. Just try this, okay? Just try moving some of the notes in between and vary the rhythm. You'll get a lot of great results, like let's see. So again, I'm just using those notes in this voicing. So I maybe pick a voicing, for example, and I'll stick within that, you know? Sorry, sometimes I go a little too crazy. It's just a force of habit. Our last tip for today, practice your chord progressions in all keys. As a piano player, this was something that was always stressed upon me. So, and there is good reason for that. The first reason, really, just to kind of lay it out there, is you're going to be able to see the keyboard a lot easier. Piano is a very visual instrument. And, you know, if you can see what, for example, you know, like A major looks like, you know, without really having to think about it, that's just going to make your life a lot easier when you're trying to add, more interesting chords. Like that thing I was saying in tip number 5, add the opposite chord. You're just trying to mess around with different notes. You'll know what's in what key because you've practiced it in a different key. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. As well, if you're interested in learning anything about music composition, music production, or anything really in general related to music, please consider subscribing because I'm going to have a lot of other videos like this coming out in the future. That about does it. Hope you all have a great day. See you in the next video.